Hey, I'm Zane Gonzalez. You're watching the Harris Highlight Show.
Na 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 na.
Coming to you live from downtown Phoenix, this is Season 2, Episode 8 of the Harris Highlight Show. Now this is going to be a very special week because it is going to be a one-man production. I'm Blake Harris, I'm your host for the evening. Now currently at Arizona State, we are on fall break, which means essentially after midterms, they give us a few days off, so everyone else went home for the weekend. I actually went and visited my friend at the University of Oregon, but I'm already back. Now, when I was in Oregon, I caught a game at Autzen Stadium. Now, if you've never seen a game at Autzen Stadium, if you're a college football fan, that is something that must be done. Definitely check it off your bucket list. I wanted to go there all my life, and it definitely lived up to the hype. A very compact stadium. It doesn't seem like it holds 50+ thousand, but it does. Very loud. However, I do believe the Arizona State student section was a little more lit, should you say. But like I said, had a great time. Unfortunately, it was not that good of a game. Washington State, I think they ended up winning by about 20 or so. So sadly, Oregon could not get the dub, but it was a great weekend for me. But as I mentioned, I'm back. I'm doing the show by myself, so hopefully we can get through this together. But before we start the show, guys, this week's episode is brought to you by SeatGeek. Head on over to SeatGeek.com and enter the promo code Harris Highlights to get $20 off your very first order. I actually used the code this past weekend to get my tickets for the Oregon football game, and actually tonight I was at Game 3 of the National League Division Series between the Dodgers and the Diamondbacks. My friend got the tickets using the promo code, so we all got $20 off as well. So not only did we save money, we got to see the Dodgers sweep the Diamondbacks, so it just keeps getting better. But guys, as we do every week, we are going to start with the latest AP poll. Now, there were some shakeups this week. The first thing that I did yesterday when it was released was text all the guys saying, my goodness, what a week for you guys to miss, because a lot of different things happened. But let's start off with Oklahoma losing to Iowa State. Number 3 Oklahoma goes down. Now, I think this came as a shock to a bunch of people. I know it came to a shock to me. I was literally chilling just in my friend's apartment, and my phone was blowing up with just texts and tweets saying, yo, Oklahoma's about to go down. And I'm thinking, no way, they're playing Iowa State. That's not going to happen. I turn on the TV, and I catch that final drive, and man, Iowa State pulls away the upset. And at the very end of the game, they went and they planted their flag at the center of the field. I really liked that. But going to this Iowa State-Oklahoma game, going more in depth, I'm looking at the stats, and Baker Mayfield, 306 yards, 24 of 33, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. You look at the stat line, and it looked like he had a good game. But then you look at the other end, and you look at Iowa State. Their quarterback, Kyle Kempt, 18 of 24, 343 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. Now, what really hurt Oklahoma was that second half performance. Anytime you're outscored 25-7 in the second half, unless you have some big lead, you're not going to win. So Iowa State, in that second half, they came ready to play. And that fourth quarter, as I mentioned, I caught the final about 3 minutes. I caught the Iowa State drive where they scored the touchdown, and they just looked good. So Oklahoma, man, oh man, this is a loss that they absolutely could not suffer. I mean, I don't want to count them out of the playoff race just yet, but with their upcoming schedule, they still got to play Oklahoma State. They got to play TCU. They got a game against Texas this week who, anything can happen in that game. So Oklahoma, for the rest of the season, essentially, if they have any hopes of making it to the college football playoff, they pretty much need to go perfect. And other top 10 losses now, we're going to switch things up to the University of Michigan, who was ranked 7th. They hosted Michigan State. Actually, they didn't host Michigan State. Well, yeah, they did host Michigan State. And it was the first time at Michigan since that play 2 years ago, which is still one of the craziest plays I've ever seen to end a game. But yeah, the good old Michigan State rivalry. Now, last week, I did pick Michigan State to get the upset because I've been saying it all year. They're kind of like Clemson from last year when it regards to Michigan. I just don't believe they are an amazing team. Their defense, probably top 10 in the country, without a doubt. But that offense this entire season has looked absolutely horrible. They haven't been able to score against anyone, and I just don't have a lot of faith in them. And it showed this week. Michigan State, as I mentioned, A very good opponent, but you're at home. You clearly are the better team. This is a game that Michigan should have won. Now, like, granted, they only allowed 14 points. Now, if coming into the game, the head coach would have said, guys, you're only going to allow 14 points this game, I'm pretty sure a lot of people would have taken it, assuming they'd get the win, but only putting up 10, you hate to see it. But Michigan, they plummeted, and they fell all the way to 17. That definitely hurts them, especially with their upcoming schedule. They do got Penn State. They do have Ohio State at the end of the year, and there are those Big Ten matchups where they could be trap games, and they can fall. So I think Michigan is officially out of the playoff hunt, and I think they're out of the Big Ten hunt as well. But also Oklahoma falling to 12. I think falling 9 spots is fair. I mean, we saw last week SC fell, so they are in front of SC. Who knows how I feel about that, but I think 12 is a good spot for them to go, especially considering that everyone else around them was moving up one, and Michigan at 17. That one hurts. That is going to be a definite tough task to move up from. But now I go to the bottom of the list right here, and there are 4 teams that hopped into the rankings that currently weren't ranked last week, and that is Michigan State at 21. Now, it seems like every week on the show, we've been talking about Michigan State and are they back? They had a tough season last year. Very disappointing season to say the least. I believe they won 4 games last year. They've already won 4 games this year. They're currently sitting at 4-1, with their one loss being against Notre Dame, who currently sits at 16. So that's not even a very bad loss. So Michigan State, I keep mentioning, I want them to be a good team this year, so that way next year's matchup with Arizona State is a good one. So Michigan State, good to see them back at 21. Stanford, they pick up a very impressive win on the road against the number 20 Utah Utes. Very close game. They got the 23-20 dub. I was very high on Utah. I thought they were a very good team out of the Pac-12, but Stanford back in the top 23. Hopefully now this gives Bryce Love a little more recognition because he definitely deserves it. Texas Tech, they hop in at 24. They are currently 4-1. They dismantled Kansas by nearly 40 points, so what else is new? But Texas Tech, great to see them. A lot of people have been asking me about Texas Tech and if I think they can make a shot at the Big 12. I'll talk about that later in the Q&A, but Texas Tech, their defense. I know in the Big 12, teams are known for defense, especially Texas Tech, but so far this season, their defense has looked much better than it has in previous years. So Texas Tech, if they can ride out this defensive powerhouse, whatever they're playing with, I think they can make a strong little push. And here we go at number 25, one of the few remaining undefeated teams in the nation, and that is Navy. They barely squeaked by Air Force, winning 48-45, excuse me. And Navy, it seems like it's the same thing every year. They're constantly a solid team, and they make their way into the top 25. So we're going to have to wait and see. Moving up to number 22 is UCF. They beat Cincinnati by about 30 points. Now that's going to be a very interesting matchup later in the season when UCF goes against South Florida. South Florida is currently at 18. I know some people are asking about that, if that's going to possibly determine a New York 6 bid, which I think it might. But I'm looking at the rest of the top 25 right now, and I think they got it right. Alabama at 1, Clemson at 2. We talked about this last week. I thought Clemson is Alabama's the better team, but Clemson is more deserving of the number 1 pick. Now, Alabama, they had a very, very close win against Texas A&M this week. They did win 27-19, but I think at one point when I was at the Oregon game, I looked at the scoreboard, and I think it was within 5 or so. I think it was maybe 24-19 if I'm not mistaken. So Texas A&M, once again, put up a solid fight. Now, Georgia, Penn State, Washington, they all move up 1 spot. Penn State at 3, Georgia at 4. I personally would swap Georgia and Penn State with each other because I do believe Georgia has been more impressive this year. Now, we got Washington at 5. Now, one of my friends was telling me about this today. I don't really know the gist of it or what truly happened, but I guess head coach Chris Peterson came out and complained that Washington wasn't getting enough primetime games. They said they were playing all of their games at 7 o'clock, and that he felt that it hurt their team because all the AP voters aren't seeing them play. All the college football fans are missing their games. And I guess on game day or something, Kirk Herbstreit came out, and he told Chris Peterson that he should be grateful that Washington is getting all the primetime games on ESPN that they're getting. So I don't know what the deal is with this little beef that's going on between the two, but I guess during the broadcast, the ESPN broadcasters were even being kind of sarcastic to Chris Peterson. So whatever's going on there, I'm kind of wondering why, because Washington, sure, they play cupcake teams. They're not playing the best, but they are 6-0. They did show us last year they are one of the better teams in the country, at least one of the 2 best teams in the Pac-12. And once again, they beat Cal 38-7. Now, granted, Cal probably not one of the 4 or 5 best teams in the Pac-12, but as we've seen from them, they're no slouch. They put up a fight against USC. They took down Ole Miss. They took down North Carolina on the road. So Washington definitely, I feel, deserves to be getting more recognition, and it's kind of sad to see them getting the disrespect that they're getting from the media. Now we got TCU at 6, which is, I am very impressed. They had a very close win against number 2 West Virginia, and from what I was hearing, I heard there were some questionable calls at the end, so who knows how the game went out, but West Virginia, they are no slouch of a team. I was actually very high on them. I almost picked them to beat TCU last week, so it's good to see TCU pick up that dub, and I'm sitting there at 5-0, guys. I think TCU, and I remember at the beginning of the year, Brady, he picked TCU as his sleeper team. That is looking more and more like a very good pick. I think they are currently, and I know this is crazy to hear, I think they are currently the team to beat in the Big 12. So far, they just looked very good. Both their offense and defense have been stepping up, and Kenny Hill, man, that guy, a potential Heisman sleeper maybe? Who knows? Wisconsin at 7, they had a good win against Nebraska. I touched upon it earlier in the year. I think they are a sleeper team to win the Big 10 as well. Now here is one that caught me off guard, and I'm very surprised to see. They're the ones that moved up the most, aside from Notre Dame and NC State. That is Washington State, the Cougars, sitting there at number 8 at 6-0. Now, if someone would have told me at the beginning of the year Washington State would climb up to 8, I would have said, you are crazy. Now, I did see them this past weekend against Oregon, and they did look like a very good team. Granted, Oregon was missing Justin Herbert, so that did contribute to a little bit, but Washington State, they are a complete team. I think they are a sleeper in the Pac-12 and a sleeper potentially for the college football playoff, essentially, I think. I mean, they're 6-0, having one of their best seasons in, who knows, 15, 20 years. That offense behind Luke Falk has looked completely unstoppable. He is one of the best quarterbacks in the nation, and their defense, I feel, is not getting enough love. They held Oregon, granted, like I said, no Justin Herbert, but they held Oregon to 10 points at Autzen Stadium. That is not an easy task. So Washington State, I mean, I'm sure this is going to be a Q&A question later, but I feel like if they can just keep this momentum going, get a win against Washington, and then a win in that Pac-12 title game, they are going to be the Pac-12 representative in the college football playoff. Going down the list, no other really complaints. Ohio State, Auburn, Miami, they all moved up a little. That's good. Now, dropping out from the rankings, Louisville. I do not understand what's going on with Louisville. As I mentioned, NC State coming into the year, I thought was a very good team coming out of the ACC. They had that week 1 slip up against South Carolina, but it looks like NC State is back now. They moved to 5-1 on the year, currently ranked 20th, and I think we're going to be seeing them making an ACC push. Also, Utah falls out of the rankings. Tough loss there. Florida, they fall out of the rankings. They were ranked 21. LSU, they're borderline making it back in. That was a pretty good game. Unfortunately, it wasn't the highest scoring game of the weekend, so no one is going to be hosting the show this week. And West Virginia, they fall out from 23, but they actually got the second most votes from the AP poll, so they're currently sitting at 27. Georgia Tech, they're next in line at 26. Other teams receiving votes, Louisville, Utah, LSU, Florida, Kentucky, Iowa State nabbing 5 votes. How do you like that? Texas A&M and Memphis getting some votes as well. But now, guys, that's pretty much all I really want to talk about. I really want to dive into some Q&As this week because there are a lot of questions that I want to try to get to. There's currently 200 on the Q&A. I don't know if I'm going to be able to make it to all 200 questions, but we're going to have to see how much time I got. But let's get underway. I didn't even talk about this game at all. Now, my Twitter was completely blowing up from this, and that is the Buffalo-Western Michigan 7-overtime game. Now, I don't know what the college football record is for most overtimes in a game, but that definitely has to be up there. Sadly, of course, the second I put the game on, I put it on in the 7th overtime, and that's when the game ended. So, if anyone watched the game, please let me know how it was. But 7 overtimes, I think it was the most combined points ever in a college football game. I think it was like 71-68, if I'm not mistaken. But wow, if there's ever a college football game to go to, that's it right there. 7 overtimes. I can't even imagine how tired those players were. And the crazy thing is that once you get to that 3rd overtime, you constantly have to be going for 2. So I don't know if they just kept getting the 2, if they kept missing the 2. Like I said, I was at Autzen all day, so I didn't really get the chance to watch Mech games. So that's one that I definitely need to go back. A lot of people were asking if I can make a game to remember for that one. So we're just going to have to wait and see. Do I think that Wisconsin should be higher or lower where they are? They haven't done anything great, but they have been very strong. I think they're at a perfect perfect spot right now. I always touch upon it. It seems like Wisconsin always is that 7, 8 to 9 range. So I think they're fine at that angle. Does Washington have a chance at making the playoff again? I honestly think they do. I think currently in the Pac-12, they're the best team. Now, it all comes down to that, first off, that Wazoo game. They really need to make sure they beat Washington State to prove, one, that that's going to be a very good win because they don't play USC this year, who's the next best team in the Pac-12. So they need to have that good, confident Pac-12 win. And then I think they need to get a win in the Pac-12 title game if they get there. But currently, I think Washington has the best chance out of the Pac-12 to make it. Is Michigan State legit contenders against Penn and Ohio State in the East? Now, I'm not entirely sure. I think they definitely have a chance to beat Ohio State. I still think Penn State is the best team in the Big Ten overall. But like I said, Michigan State, they have looked good. With a 1 loss against Notre Dame, that is not too bad. Speaking of Notre Dame, is Notre Dame capable of making the college football playoff or winning New Year's Six game? Now, I was talking with Lyle and Josh about this past week, and I think if Notre Dame wins out the rest of their schedule, they are easily going to have a legit chance to be in the college football playoff. They do have a huge game against USC coming up, but I think if they can win that game, it's just going to help them out. But I definitely think that Notre Dame, when it's all said and done, are legit contenders. Do I think game day will be at State College when Penn State plays against Michigan? At this point, most likely, because Penn State is still going to be a top 3 team. Michigan's going to move up. I don't know what the other games are for that week, but as of now, my guess would be that one. What do you think of game day being in Virginia for 2 FCS schools, and would you be opposed to USC facing Oklahoma in New Year's Six Bowl? Now, this is a very interesting question because I know every year college game day goes to an FCS school. Now, this year I believe it's James Madison, who's currently like the powerhouse in FCS, so I like it. I mean, are there other games that are more deserving of hosting game day this week? Of course, but if you're going to go to an FCS school, James Madison, they're more than deserving of hosting it. And would I be opposed to USC facing Oklahoma in a New Year's Six Bowl? Of course I wouldn't. I think it actually might happen, but for that one, we're just gonna have to wait and see. Do you think the Georgia Bulldogs will win out? I don't think they're gonna win out. It's the SEC. That's a very tough conference. And plus, it looks like they might be in the SEC title game against Alabama, so that'll be a very tough one. If the season ended today, who would be your top 4 teams in the college football playoff? Well, currently my top 4 are the exact same as they were last week. Clemson, Alabama, Georgia, and Penn State. Which program has matured the best in the Power 5 and which in the non-Power 5? Also, do you think that Oklahoma should be higher than USC, even though Oklahoma had a worse loss than what happened to USC? I think the team that's most matured in the Power 5, I'm going to go with either Georgia, because one, it seems like for years and years, Georgia has had the talent. They just haven't been able to step up and, make that push. And TCU, TCU the last few years have been kind of up and down, but all of a sudden, like I said, they're sitting there at 6. They're making a potential college football playoff push at 4, so I think those two are the ones that have made the push. And for non-Power 5, I got to go with San Diego State. They lost to Donnell Pumphrey, who, had a miraculous season last year, and look at them. They're sitting top 20 right now, potentially can make a top 10 push. We're going to have to wait and see. And in regards to the Oklahoma-USC ranking, USC bias aside, I don't like how they were ahead of SC. SC, they lost by 3 at Washington State, who is currently ranked 8th in the country. Meanwhile, Oklahoma, at home, number 3 team, you lose to Iowa State by a touchdown. I do think they should have fallen a little more, but like I said, it's the AP poll. It is early. I got no complaints. How legit is Miami after beating Florida State? Now, that one was a very good game, a very thrilling finish. Miami, I'm still not sold on them. They are currently undefeated. They have had some questionable games where, I just don't believe in them. Florida State, though, I don't know what's wrong with that team. I think they're currently sitting at 1-3. My good friend Justin, I've been talking to him about it, and he thinks Florida State is just done for the season. So I don't know how legit they are after beating a Florida State team, but I am impressed with them that they are undefeated. We're going to have to see what they can do in remaining ACC play. Which team's coaches have the most chances of staying or getting fired? Missouri, Arkansas, Florida State, UCLA, Tennessee, Kansas, Baylor, Chattanooga. Well, I hope the Chattanooga coach doesn't get fired because he has a lot to improve on with that team. I think if anyone's going to get, at least that's on the hot seat, that's Butch Jones out of Tennessee. They have looked awful this year, and I think change is happening. Florida State, I think Jimbo Fisher is going to be fine. It's been a tough season so far, but a coach like him, you can't fire him. Baylor, I think a lot of changes are coming in the next few weeks, not just with the head coach, but with the entire program. I think they have the potential to win maybe 2 games max for the rest of the season. I mean, you look at that schedule, maybe Kansas is the only team they can squeak out a win against. Who is the best 2-loss team in the country right now? Well, I'm just looking at the AP Top 25, and the only team in there is Stanford. So I'm going to go with Stanford currently, with West Virginia slightly behind. Actually, you know what? I'm going to flip that around. I'm going to go with West Virginia as the best 2-loss team because they had a very close loss against TCU and a very close loss against Virginia Tech. So I currently think West Virginia, I personally think they belong in the top 25, but 2 losses, it's kind of tough to put them there. But I think West Virginia is the best 2-loss team. UCF, San Diego State, UCF, and Navy. Which one of these teams has the best chance to make a New Year's Six bowl? That's a tough one. UCF and USF, they play each other, so one of those teams is going to cancel each other out. I honestly am going to go with, I think, San Diego State. I mean, solely based off the rest of their schedule is much easier than the other ones. If Ohio State loses to Penn State, can they still make it into the College Football Playoff? Absolutely not. I don't think so. I know you keep talking about Bryce Love and Saquon Barkley, and I'm sure you haven't seen much Wisconsin football, but running back Jonathan Taylor just had his second 200-yard rushing day and his 7th in the country in college football in regards to rushing yards. What are your thoughts? I actually did look at his past highlights from this week because I got the notification saying he ran for over 200 yards, and I like what he's been doing. He's been doing it very quietly, as you mentioned. His second 200-plus yard rushing game of the year, 7th in the nation. I do think if Wisconsin, if they can keep winning out, I think Jonathan Taylor might have a potential little late season Heisman push. Now, really quickly, I want to touch upon this for a rushing performance, and that is Khalil Tate, quarterback at the University of Arizona. Now, if you guys didn't hear what kind of a game he had, he put on a performance. He had 327 rushing yards on 14 carries, averaging over 23 yards a carry, 4 touchdowns. It was the most ever for a quarterback in college football in regards to rushing. Unbelievable performance. And he also was 11 of 12 for 142 yards and 1 touchdown. So Khalil Tate, that's a name that you definitely need to keep an eye on. Is UCLA done? Which, I mean, do they have a chance to get in the top 25? I think they are. I mean, I still think they're definitely a better team than last year, but their upcoming schedule is only going to get tougher with these Pac-12 games. I don't think we're going to see them in the top 25 anymore. Now, this is a very good question. What do you think of creating a Harris Highlights Community Top 25 poll? Now, I'm sure there's some sort of way we can do that by figuring it out, by maybe setting up like a poll system. I know Brady's more of the tech kind of guy, so I'm sure he could probably figure it out. But I'm definitely interested in something like that. If enough viewers would be interested, I know it's a lot, having to choose 25 teams, but if we could somehow find a way to rank them all and make our own top 25 poll, that is definitely something that we will do. Now, I like this one. That's not really much of a question. I am too burned out and angry after last night's loss to ask anything at all for the Q&A. Good game and fair play to the Spartans. The people who say it's not a rivalry are idiots. Hopefully we can bounce back. I mean, yeah, that was, like I said, that was a very good game, and I definitely think you guys are going to be able to bounce back. Which teams do I think will go undefeated, at least in the regular season? Now, I mean, it's always tough to pick against Bama, so I think Bama's going to be one that we see. I think Clemson has the potential to go undefeated, although they still have to play NC State, which I feel can be a very tough game for them. I think Washington, if they can get that win against Washington State, they have the potential to go undefeated. Those are really, I think, the only teams, and then maybe like the South Floridas, the San Diego States, the UCFs, Navies, those teams also, I think, have the potential to go undefeated as well. Do you think Oklahoma's loss affected Baker Mayfield's Heisman campaign? If so, how much? I think it hurt him like crazy. I think this definitely maybe puts him on the outskirts of the top 5, and he needs a hell of a season if he has any chance of making the Heisman finalists. Like I said, Oklahoma's 1 loss away from not only losing out on the college football playoff, but completely shattering Baker Mayfield's Heisman campaign. So if he has any chances of making it, his season needs to start this week and have an amazing game against Texas. What conference can get 2 teams into the playoffs? Now, this is a very interesting question. A lot of people have been asking me about this. If there's any conference that's going to have 2 teams make it, I think it's going to be the SEC, and that's going to be Alabama and Georgia. Now, granted, whoever wins that SEC title game, they're going to make it in. But if Georgia can keep playing the way they've been playing all year, and they go into that SEC title game ranked maybe second or third, and it's a close game, there's no reason that Georgia should not be in that college football playoff. Now, I know it's going to be, well, if they're ranked third and they lose, they should fall. But the college football playoff is all about having the 4 best teams in it. Now, if you have a Georgia team that goes in there undefeated and they lose to an Alabama team by like 7 or less, they're more than deserving of being in the college football playoff. So I think if it's going to be any conference, it's without a doubt going to be the SEC. Are Michigan's title chances over? I didn't think they had any to begin with, but especially after this past weekend, I think so. Unless they can just go on some tear and win out, that's the only way they have any chance. Who wins the Pac-12 after this weekend? I think it's a 3-team race. It's either between Washington State, Washington, or USC. But I think it's going to be between either USC or one of those 2 teams. Because with Washington and Washington State having to play each other, it cancels one of those 2 out. So those are my 3 current teams. But it's going to come down to who essentially gets the win in that Washington State Apple Cup game. Is West Virginia's season over with losses to TCU and Virginia Tech? I don't think so. I've been high on West Virginia the last few weeks. I just mentioned that they're the best 2-loss team in the country. They played those 2 teams very well. I think West Virginia still has the chance to finish with 10 wins or maybe 9 wins on the season. Do you think that Purdue can beat Wisconsin with the way we played against Michigan and Louisville? I mean, I definitely think there's a chance. I think that Wisconsin is a better team than Louisville and Michigan, so it's going to be tougher. But stranger things have happened. Conference play is always tough, but who knows? Like I said, who knows? Who knows? Who will be the next team to play college football playoff spoiler? Oh, now that is a very good one. I'm looking at this list, and I honestly have no idea. At least this upcoming week, a bunch of these top 10 teams aren't really playing many. Maybe like a TCU losing, I don't know, in the upcoming weeks. Maybe a Washington State losing in the next few weeks. Currently, though, like I said, I'm just looking at this week's schedule, and I don't see any shakeups happening at all. Will Miami go to the ACC Championship? Ooh, that's a tough one. Like I said, I'm not as high in Miami as a lot of people are, so we're going to have to wait and see. I definitely think that they have the potential to make it, but I'm not going to bet on anything there. Will Washington and Washington State decide the Pac-12 representative? It definitely is going to play a factor. It's going to decide who makes it to the Pac-12 title game. But then whoever wins that game with, I assume, USC, that's going to be the one to determine it. Who is the favorite in the ACC Coastal? Miami or Virginia Tech? Or will Georgia Tech play spoiler when they play Miami next Saturday? That's a good one. Georgia Tech, they're on the outskirts of the top 25. They are a very good team, so I would keep an eye on them. I currently think it's Miami, mainly because they are undefeated. Virginia Tech, they do have that loss against Clemson, but it can go either way. Does Wisconsin have a shot in all caps? Yes, I believe Wisconsin does, in fact, have a shot. Do I think Kenny Hill should be in the Heisman consideration? I think at this moment he should. Like I said, he's currently 6th in the country with TCU. He's had a very good season. I wouldn't necessarily really put him maybe like top 3 or 4, maybe like top 7 or 8. But who knows? If he keeps winning, we can see him there. Will UCF versus UCF on November 24th decide the group of 5 team in the New York Six? I think it definitely has the potential to. If both those teams are undefeated, that's going to be a very good game. That's going to be a battle of top 15 teams, so it definitely is going to have a lot on the line. Can Texas Tech surprise the rest of the Big 12 and make a run at the Big 12 title? I think they can. I mean, in the Big 12, all you got to do is score points, and their defense, as I mentioned, has been stepping up. So Texas Tech, a very surprised team, not expecting much of them coming into the year. Do you think Alabama and Clemson, number 3, is inevitable? Now, I don't think it's inevitable. I think it's likely because those are currently the 2 best teams in the country. I personally would like to see it. I think having them rematch for the 3rd time to really determine, who wins the series would be great, but there are a lot of good teams in college football this year. Aside from USC, who is Notre Dame's toughest matchup the rest of the season? Well, I'm looking at the rest of their schedule, and the one that they actually have, Notre Dame, if they can somehow win out, this team, without a doubt, deserves to make it to the college football playoff. So, as I mentioned, they have USC. And then after that, they got North Carolina State. Then they got Wake Forest. Then they're at Miami versus Navy, and then Stanford. So, I mean, if you look currently at the remaining schedule, they play the number 11th ranked team, the number 13th ranked team, the number 20th ranked team, the number 23rd ranked team, and the number 25th ranked team. And plus, they're going to have a win over the 21st ranked team and a 1-point loss to the number 4 team. So, Notre Dame, if I'm talking about hardest game, I think it's going to be North Carolina State because I do think they're a good team. But wow, that is a very tough schedule they got coming up. It's going to be interesting to see what they can do. If they can somehow manage to squeak maybe one, even if Notre Dame slips up against USC, that schedule is still very favorable where they could potentially make like a, I don't want to say a college football playoff push, but definitely a New Year's Six push. Now that you've visited Autzen, which stadium do you hope to cross off the bucket list? Now this is one I've been telling all my friends. In a few years, I just hope I'm at the point where I have the time and money where there's one college football season where every week I just go to a different game. Now, in regards to stadiums, I want to cross off my bucket list. Pretty much all the SEC ones like Alabama, Auburn, LSU, Florida. I really want to make it to those ones. Tennessee, Death Valley, and Clemson. I know there's a debate on which the real Death Valley is. I really want to see a game there. I mean, those are the ones at the top of my bucket list. But like I said, there's just so many. And there's not really one that's currently number one on the list. In the top 10, who is the most overrated team in your opinion? Now that is a fantastic question. Overrated? I mean, Washington State at 8. Like I said, they're a good team. Are they the 8th best team in the country? I don't think so. How do you feel about the early struggles to Zane Gonzalez's NFL career? Man, I don't know what's going on there in Cleveland, but Zane, if you're listening, bud, you need to step it up. You have been letting me down in fantasy and in my heart and in my fans' hearts. Everyone is just wondering, how come you're not making all these easy field goals? I think he missed like a 30-yard field goal this weekend. It hasn't looked good for him in Cleveland, so hopefully he can turn things around and rebound and make his late MVP campaign push. Does Iowa have a shot at the Big Ten West? I don't think so. I just think there's too many good Big Ten teams. I think they're going to have 1 or 2 more losses the rest of the season. They're definitely a good team, but I don't think so. Which game is bigger to decide on who's going to the playoff? Georgia versus Auburn or Penn State versus Ohio State? I think it's going to be Georgia versus Auburn because Ohio State, as I mentioned, I think that they're probably going to have 1 or 2 more slip-ups on the year, whereas Auburn, they might be a one-loss team. I think the only game they probably lose this year is going to be maybe to Alabama. That Georgia game is going to be a huge game, so I think Georgia versus Auburn, that's going to be a huge one on the line, especially for Georgia. Did Saquon Barkley lose his spot as Heisman frontrunner this week? I don't think so. I mean, he had, about 80 yards. I think he had a rushing touchdown. There were no performances behind him that really would have leapfrogged themselves over Saquon Barkley, so I think he's still currently number 1. Would you rather, this is a great question, would you rather hang out with Zane for a week or the Chattanooga Mocs for a week? I mean, I think I would rather hang out with Zane for a week. I mean, I met him this past February. He was very cool. But I think it'd be cool to hang out with an NFL player. I mean, maybe he could take me to the locker room, take me to a game. I feel like that can be a lot of fun. The Seminoles won Chattanooga. At this point, it's a battle between one-win teams. I think Chattanooga might have a chance to beat Florida State in that game. What are you majoring in at Arizona State? I'm currently majoring in sports journalism. Highly recommend that major if you're interested at all. How do you feel about the number 1 recruit in the country, Justin Fields, committing to Georgia? Now, I thought this was a very, very interesting one because, as we've seen from Fromm, he has looked fantastic. I mean, Jake Fromm has easily won that starting quarterback job, and then he got Jacob Eason, who, he was a very good quarterback, and he got injured. Now he's battling as a second, so now he's going to come in there as the 3rd-string quarterback, so very interesting to see. As I mentioned last week, I think we might see Eason transfer if he can't win that starting job again, so maybe this Fields guy will be going in as the backup, but like I said, very interesting selection. Here's a question from good old Spencer Goldstein. How was the U of O game? As I mentioned earlier, my man, it was very, very lit. Favorite game to remember? Ooh, that is a very good question. Favorite game to remember? Now, I really enjoy doing the game to remembers for the old games from like 10 years ago, like how I did the USC Texas game, I did the Boise State Oklahoma game, the Texas Tech Texas game. I really like doing those ones because when those games happened, I was like 10 or 11 years old, so I don't really remember them that much. So it's kind of cool getting to go back and go through the entire game and kind of rewatch it. Now that a few top 10 teams have been defeated in the past 2 weeks, which conference do you think has the biggest chance of getting left out? Also, do you think that this year will be 2 teams from the same conference like Alabama and Georgia? As I mentioned, I do think there's a chance that Alabama and Georgia can both make it in. Kind of touching on this question from last week, and I think this even helps it more. I think it's the Big 12. I think there's just so many teams that are going to be making that push where they're going to be left out. Like I said, TCU, they're sitting there at 6. They can easily lose a game in the next few weeks, and they're going to fall. And with Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, and Texas Tech, they got games against each other coming up. So I don't think that they're going to be able to make a push. Now, granted, who knows? I mean, there could be a slip up in the Pac-12, but I think an SEC school is guaranteed. I think a Big 10 school is guaranteed. And I think essentially a Pac-12 school is guaranteed, especially considering that Apple Cup and the Pac-12 title game. So Big 12 currently, I think they're on watch to not make the college football playoff. Which non-top 5 team, so anyone except for Alabama, Clemson, Penn State, Georgia, Washington, has the best shot at winning the championship? Man, I'm looking at this. I think Wisconsin has a shot. As I mentioned, I think they have a chance to make it to the Big Ten title game. If they can win that Big Ten title game, I think we're going to see them in the college football playoff. I think USC, they still have a very good chance. They need to win out. They got to win that Pac-12 title game. And as I mentioned, Notre Dame, if Notre Dame somehow wins out with this remaining schedule, we are going to be seeing them in the college football playoff. Why did you not post a best of week 5? Last week was just very hectic with editing last week's show. Midterms were this past week, and as I mentioned, I was traveling to Oregon. I simply just had no time. I wish I could have gotten to it, but as I mentioned, sadly, nothing. Do you think ASU can keep up the trend of Heisman caliber kickers? Well, they got a great winner, Brandon Ruiz, this year. I think definitely in a few years down the line, he's going to be in the Heisman talks, but this year, not so much. He still has a few things he needs to work on. If Alabama loses to Georgia or Auburn, are they out of the playoff? I don't think so. I mean, it's Alabama. They always find ways to bounce back. Can Kellen Moore's 50-3 record be broken? I feel like that gets slept on so much. The guy went 50-3. I personally don't think that record is ever going to be broken. What's your opinion on Auburn's chances on going to the Final Four? I think if they can beat Bama and then win that SEC title game, they definitely have a chance. But it's going to be tough, but they can do it. Favorite NCAA video game? Ooh, I think my favorite, like I said, more bias here, is NCAA Football 07, the one where Reggie Bush was on the cover, because that was the first ever one that I had, and I thought that was just the greatest game ever. And how about that? That was the last of the comments. Now, I'm sure there was some that I didn't go over because I got a lot of the same questions over and over, so if I didn't get to your question, that's why. But man, the fact that I was able to get through most of those questions, very, very impressive. But now it is time to go on to the pick'ems. Now, sadly, it's just going to be me making the pick'ems this week. I'm not going to update the scores from last week because I want to do that when the guys are here. Now, all these picks for this week, they're not going to count for next week because then that would be an unfair advantage for me to just make a huge push. But hey, it is my show, so I can pretty much do whatever I want. But I'm not going to do that to the guys. But guys, we do have our fantasy Pick'ems League. If you haven't joined by now, it's not too late, but it kind of is too late. But hey, if you haven't joined, go on and join right now. The winner does receive a $25 gift card of their choice, and currently this week we have a sole leader, and that is Agent Killa Deluxe with 48 points. He's in sole possession of the lead, so man, he made a late season push. This guy was nowhere to be found last week. Now he's in the lead. I'm telling you, all you need is one good week to push yourself up to the very top. But we are going to go to the pick'ems right now, so unfortunately, with Lyle not here, I have to ring the bells myself. So here we go. Those bells are ringing. Let's get the pick'ems underway. We're going to start things off with number 24, Texas Tech at West Virginia. I think Texas Tech, as I mentioned, has a chance to make a Big 12 push. But I'm going to go with West Virginia this one. They are home. Will Greer, he has looked very good this year. Very slept on for quarterbacks. I think he's going to get the job done. Number 10, Auburn at LSU. Now, I do think Auburn gets this win, But anytime you got to go to Death Valley, that's a tough game. Regardless of how bad LSU has looked this year, I can see LSU coming out with the dub, but I do think Auburn gets this one. Georgia Tech at number 11, Miami. Now this one, I think this might be my upset pick of the week, and I'm going to go with Georgia Tech in this one. They've looked very good this year, only one loss. Miami, they had a squeak one out this past weekend against Florida State, so I'm still not high on them. Like I said, I don't want anyone like hating on me that I'm hating on any team. I'm not hating on them. From what I've seen, and like I said, I don't get to watch full games. I just watch highlights of games. I just haven't been impressed. So Georgia Tech, they're going to be my upset pick of the week. Number 12, Oklahoma against Texas. Now, like I said, this is always a good game. Anything can happen. I think Oklahoma's going to bounce back. I think they were preparing for this game this past week, not even thinking about Iowa State. So I think Oklahoma, they take care of business. Number 25, Navy versus Memphis. This is a tough one. Navy is undefeated. Memphis does have one loss. I am going to go with Navy in this one, but I really want to go with Memphis. Utah at number 13, USC. Utah, they were undefeated last week. They were ranked 20th. I think they're a good team. If this game was at Utah, I would be very worried for USC, but it is at home. I think USC gets the job done. Oregon at number 23, Stanford. Oregon, without Justin Herbert, they just look like a lost cause. I think their season is just a spiral going downhill. Stanford, they're back at 23rd. They're looking like a better team. I think Stanford gets this done. Now we go to the worst of the worst, and that is between Miami, Ohio, and Kent State. Ooh, this is a brutal game. But you know what? I think I'm going to go with Kent State in this one, just cause I made a highlight video for a guy from Kent State, so I'm going to go with them on that one. And now we have Arizona State's game. That is number 5, Washington at Arizona State. Surprisingly, the spread for this game is only 17 for Washington. I thought it'd be a lot higher. I think ASU can definitely put up a fight because they have looked very good this year. Washington, though, they are the 5th ranked team in the country for a reason. They have looked good. I think ASU might be able to hang with them at the half, maybe even in the third quarter. But ultimately, I think Washington takes this one. Now, granted, if Arizona State can pull off this upset and take down the 5th ranked Huskies, one, I hope they let us storm the field because I really want to do that. But man, is this only going to shake up the college football playoff picture even more? So we're going to have to wait and see. But I do think UW does come out with this win. But that does wrap up this edition of the Harris Highlight Show. I can't believe I was able to get through it. Thank you everyone for bearing with me on this one for the one-man show. Don't worry, all the guys are going to be back next week. If you're interested in any Harris Highlights merchandise, head on over to the Harris Highlights merch shop. I'll put the link in the description. Pick up some Don't Sleep on Chattanooga, Zane for Heisman, and official Harris Highlights merchandise today. Christmas is only 2 months away, so it's never too early to start shopping. As I mentioned, this episode was brought to you by SeatGeek. Head over to SeatGeek.com, get $20 off your purchase by entering the promo code Harris Highlights. Definitely something you don't want to pass up on. Everyone's doing it. Don't be that one guy that doesn't use the discount promo. This has been Blake Harris coming to you from downtown Phoenix. Make sure you like Harris Highlights on Facebook, as well as follow me on Twitter. I'm trying to get more involved there with my fans, so if you have some questions for me, I'll be answering those as well, and just talking college football, so definitely a must if you have a Twitter. Also listen to the show on SoundCloud, so if you can't listen on YouTube, that's a better way to listen to as well. But like I mentioned, guys, we'll all be back next week. As always, thank you so much for listening. Make sure you give this video a thumbs up, and I will see you next week.